Alright, so welcome back to a new one on this channel, and in this one we need to talk about the hybrid reverb. Alright, so let's just begin. This reverb has several parts. We have an input part, then we have a convolution reverb, and then we have an algorithmic reverb. So understanding the input is really important, and also you need to know that you can blend them in different ways. If you don't want to use both at the same time, you can choose. So if you go right here, it will let you select serial, which is going to be using first the convolution going into the algorithmic reverb. Then parallel is going to be both at the same time, and then a blend and then goes out. Or maybe you just want to use the algorithm, or maybe you want to use the convolution. But before we cover the convolution, we need to talk about the input, which is again super important. I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to show you that I have a synthesizer right here, and it's a mono sound of a type of bass, let's say. So when I turn it on, we just get it. Now the send is going to be the amount of dry signal. If I go lower, it will affect the reverb effect. So we have no reverb. So the send is super important. Now then you have the pre-delay. Now the pre-delay is a very standard control on all reverbs. Now the cool thing is that you can sync right here. And I believe, again, I don't need to explain this because again, it's super simple. But usually with the reverb or maybe a delay, you have milliseconds, you use milliseconds, but right here, you can use sync to use divisions. So now you don't need to go to the online calculator just to figure out what's your tempo and, what's the division. And this is something that all plugins should have. And it's, again, super, super useful. Now, still, if you don't like it, you can do the math and just use milliseconds all the way to nothing and all the way up to 4 seconds. Now, another cool thing that you get right here is going to be the feedback. Now, this will feedback the pre-delay output. So it can get a little bit loud. I'm going to be playing something. We are using this, which is a very short type of reverb. If I keep going up, notice that we get a tone, and that's the feedbacking. Now, depending again on what you're using, I'm going to be maybe using a real space, and then maybe something longer. Notice how the feedback is affecting it. And again, you get almost like a metallic sound. And it depends on your pre-delay. If I go all the way to nothing, it gets really wild, right? It's almost clipping. Alright, so cool feedback. It's a nice little addition to this plugin. And this is the input section. Notice how important this is. Every change we make is going to affect whatever we do right here. Alright, so if you don't know what convolution is it uses a file, which is a recording of a real place, or maybe, a recording of a place. So the file captures the essence of that place, and this one is going to use it, and then you get that, reverb sound. Now, you have tons of places to choose from early reflections, right here, if I go right here, or there, and then, we have a ton of places. Or you can use halls or real studios, impulse responses, and it will, give you a sense of how that studio sound when you work right there. Let me just go to Cave Art. And all of these different files, the different convolution files are going to sound a little bit different. Even if you go to springs, you have a type of a spring reverb. And I'm going to use this one, Abbey Temple. And it sounds like that. And notice that it's not super long. Now, you can alter this file that you have right here, the impulse response. And you have the controls right here. You have the attack, a decay, and you have a size. Now, if you don't want it, you can just turn it off. And again, this will affect the sound. Still, modifying these controls will modify the file, and of course, it will sound a little bit different. Now you have the decay, you can go all the way up to 20 seconds, which is max as you can go, but you can trim it. And notice that if I zoom, you can see the waveform right here, which is, the impulse response. So if I go on the decay, down on the decay, at some point, notice that it's just trimming it. So it's going to show you how it looks. And if I go down on the decay, it's just 20 milliseconds, which is going to be a very short type of room. We have almost no decay. Want to make it shorter? Maybe 5 seconds. It's going to do the trick. If I go all the way up, is whatever the impulse response is. Now, also, you have the attack. If I go up on the attack, notice how it's modifying the file. So if I go there, maybe you can go all the way back to 0, or you just, notice that by doing this, it's like adding kind of a pre-delay, smoothing the reverb, and I'm gonna go all the way wet. So when I play it, notice that the sound ramps up. It's not super fast when it begins. Right now it's super fast. Right now it's just gonna be like smoothing it out, and it's just gonna ramp up. So notice that all of these controls are super important for whatever file that you want to use right here. You have a lot of places, and I think this is just more than enough. But if you want to load your own impulse responses, you can. So I have right here a tiny little library called Echo Thief. This is a website. You can go there and you can download, impulse responses for different places. So what you could do, you could just maybe open a file and just drop it, drag and drop, and it's just gonna load that. So I'm gonna go to, I don't know, I'm gonna go to Underground. Why not? So you have a lot of files right here. So what you need to do, you just need to, again, to drag and drop. Let me just make this a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna do Batcave. Why not? I'm gonna drag and drop, and there we go. It's gonna load the file. So this is how the Batcave sounds. Now, there's one thing that you need to be aware of. Right here, when you load your own custom impulse response, it's going to change to user right here. And notice it says Batcave. Now, when you drag and drop a file, it's going to pick up all the, all the files that you have on that folder. And notice that I have a lot. So when you drag and drop, you will get access to all the impulse responses that you have right there on that different folder. And this is cool. Now, you have a downside to this, which is not a downside. It's just, the way it works. When you drag and drop a file, you save your project and it just is going to remember, right? But when you start a new project, it will not remember whatever it is that you're using on user. So you will need to go to the folder again and drag and drop whatever impulse response you want to use for, a different project. And that's the convolution. That's how it works. You select your file, or you drag and drop one, and then you just modify it with the attack, decay, and size, and you're pretty much done. Okay, so then you have the algorithmic type of reverb, and it's a little bit more complex than the, the convolution, because, again, it's digital, and we have a lot of control. We can do a lot more things. I'm going to be changing it to the algorithmic reverb, and notice that when we select something, it will grade out the one that we are not using. And if we are using both, we're going to talk about this in a second, you can use a blend of both. We're going to get back to this in a minute. Now, you don't get a million different types of algorithms like you would on, I don't know, a Valhalla plugin or something like that. You get a few, but they are all different, and you have a lot of controls, so you can just, control them a little bit better. Now, they are all different, but most of them share some of the same features. For example, if I go to Dark Hall, you have the decay, the size, and some of the options. If I go to the next one, notice that it's some of the options are changing. It's because it's a different algorithm. But, some of the options remain the same. Now, each type has a decay and a size, and I guess, this is pretty obvious. Just like the convolution, I'm going to be playing something, and you have the decay, it's 3 seconds. You can go all the way down and make it super short, and if you go all the way down, all the way up, it's going to be 60 seconds decay. That's, pretty long and lush. Sometimes this is, that's what you want. This is what you want. Sometimes you don't, but you get it. Now, the size, of course, it means the, the size of the room. If I go down, it's going to make it shorter. And if I go up, it's going to make it a larger size. Go down. You can really hear the, the resonant the resonance of the early reflections. We're going to talk about that in a minute. More diffused, because it's just longer. So the damping, it's something that we get on all the different types of, modes or types, but you don't get it on the prism, right? So I'm going to go back to dark hall, make it decay a little bit more, and I'm going to go all the way up to dry and the wet, so we can really hear what it's doing. And the damping is just going to make it darker, or it's going to make it brighter. By default, it's right on the 50%, so it's, not doing much. But if I go down, notice it's super bright now. If I go all the way up, it's just going to make it darker. So it's a filter. Bright, dark. Right. Now, when you freeze, when you press this button, it's going to freeze and keep looping whatever you have on the buffer of the reverb. Let me just show you. I'm going to be playing something, and we have a long decay. So I'm going to be playing it. I'm going to do something like that. And we get that, that decay. And I'm going to freeze it. And I'm not playing anything right now. So, at that point in time, whatever was playing on the reverb, whatever it was doing, it's just going to keep it looping, and it's going to freeze it. Now, there's one thing that you need to know is that if I play again the synthesizer, you can see I'm playing, the reverb gets disregarded, so it will not input or take new sounds. And this is why you have this arrow. This means that if you enable this, and now I play a new key, and I'm going to be playing a higher key, so we can just, hear it, it's going to grab it and freeze it as well. So you can get really cool and super lush and fun sounds. Now, you need to take into account that it's going to get massive and louder as you keep pressing more keys. But you can always remove it and unfreeze it and start over if you wanted to. Right now I'm going all the way wet. Maybe we can do just a tiny little bit. And it's going to be, it's going to sound glorious. Right? Super great. Alright, so let me just stop this. Alright, so before we go to each of the options that we have right here on each of the different types, notice that they all change. I'm going to be talking about the output section. And then we're going to go back and cover the different types. Now I'm going to stay on the dark hall and its default values for now. I'm going to go maybe right here. 50%, right? Maybe we can double click it and just get it. So on the output, you get the stereo. If you're on 100%, you are already on stereo mode. So it's full stereo. But if you go up, it's going to make it wider. Or if you want to make it mono all the way down, it's just going to make it mono, right? So super cool. Now then you have the vintage. Now the vintage, what it does is going to downsample the resolution. And this is the idea of this is trying to emulate vintage gear. And I'm going to enable the vintage. I'm going to click it and I'm going to drag up with my mouse. And maybe I can go all the way up so we can just hear the reverb. If I turn it off, maybe I'm going to go up on the decay so we get something obvious. If I go down, more hi-fi, less hi-fi. Now if we keep going up, we have different modes. We have the old, which sounds super dark, and it's great. We have older, and now we can hear the resolution. The resolution goes, down. And we go to extreme, which is gonna pretty much go down in the resolution, downsample it by, a lot. Now, all of this depends on you. Maybe you like it and you want to blend a little bit of dry and the wet and get that, vintage type of sound. All right, so I'm going to double click and I'm going to go back to off. Now, the next thing on the chain is going to be the dry and the wet, and I guess I don't need to explain this. All the way to here, all the way to the left, it's going to be no reverb and all the way reverb. Now, you have the bass. Now, this one is going to mono the bass, and this is like the option that you have on the tool, utility. So when you click it and you have mono enable, it's going to take everything that is below 180 hertz, so sub frequencies, and it's gonna make them mono. And this is, something cool that is going to let you control the bass a little bit more. And it's 180 hertz and below. I'm gonna disable it, disengage, and maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't, you have an EQ. Right, so if I go with the EQ, I'm not going to spend a lot of time right here because it's a pretty simple EQ. You have a low and you have a high. Now, when you go to low, you have different slopes. Notice that if I go up and down, and I'm just clicking it and dragging it with my mouse, or you can go right here at the bottom and select the slope. So if I go up, which is, killing pretty much everything that is right here, super aggressive slope, or you just can go to something smoother like 6. This is, again, great. Now then, if you go to the first, which is low or the high, you can use, a filter, or you can use a shelving EQ, super useful. Now then, again, the higher frequencies, the high shelf is going to be the same. All right, so again, with the slopes, you can select different slopes. Now the 2 and the 3 is a bell, so you can just boost the different frequencies. Now with a bell, you have a Q instead of a slope. Right, so this is going to make it narrow, or just going to make it less narrow, right? Just going to make it wide. And again, all this is really great because you can EQ whatever that comes out of your reverb. If I play it, it's going to be super bright because maybe I'm going to boost right here, so it's a little bit obvious. And I'm going to maybe right here cut the lows. Right? Super nasal and bright. Now, there's one more thing that you need to take into account. Right here at the bottom, if you go to the left, it says pre-algo. So by default, this one is disengaged, and it means that this EQ is post. So the EQ is affecting the sound that comes out, the reverb sound. Now, what you can do, you can just click it, and now this EQ is going to be right after the convolution. So it means that whatever we EQ right here, whatever sound, is going to go into the algorithmic reverb. This again changes the whole thing, because now the algorithmic reverb is going to process whatever boost and cut we do right here, instead of shaping the final result. Right. And again, if you want to disengage the EQ, you can. You just need to click it, and there you go. It's dead. Okay, so that's pretty much the whole plugin. Now we need to discuss the different modes and, just check them out. And I'm going to stay for now on the dark hall. Now this one is, it's a medium to large hall. And you have different options like the mod, the base X, multiply, and then shape. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention is the delay. Now, the delay is the pre-delay, and this is something super cool. And I'm going to show you right now because I can. So I'm going to stand on serial. So first we get the convolution reverb, and then we get the delay of the algorithmic, right? So convolution is going to the algorithmic. So if I play it, we get a combination of the convolution. And if I do a little bit of pre-delay, this is the pre-delay of the convolution. But if I go to the algorithmic, I can choose a different pre-delay completely independent from, the convolution. So I'm going to be doing around 1 second, which is, pretty obvious. So I'm going to be playing something. That is what happens. So first, we get the convolution because it's super short. We don't have a pre-delay. And then after a second, the dark hall is going to kick in. So you can create different textures with this. And this is again a super cool thing. All right. So okay, so I'm, deviating from the main topic. So I'm going to start with the mod. If I play it, this is what you get by default. If I go all the way down, it's not going to use it. And what the mod is going to be like a coursing effect. So if I go all the way down, it's pretty resonant. Right? So the mod, since it's a coursing effect, if I go all the way up, it's gonna smooth that resonance. Right? So sounds less diffused, right? More diffused. If I go all the way down, less diffused. Right. So I'm going to double click it so we can go back to default. And now then on this one, you have the shape. So we do get the size, but that's a different thing. Then we get the shape, which is could be a different, a different shape of the room. This could be a small room, a very narrow and large room, and and so on and so on. So the shapes, again, it's just gonna change the shape. If I go all the way down, you get a different tone. If I go right there, and all the way up, notice how different it sounds. Super close. Sounds much distant. All right. So I'm going to double click it so we can go back to default, and we need to talk about the bass X and the bass mult. Now think of this as a bass control, right? And this is what it is. Now, so right here at the bottom, you have the bass multiplier. So right now, of course, we have a sound on the full spectrum, and you have the bass frequencies. So if it's on 100%, you're not doing anything. So the multiplier is going to kind of boost or attenuate the lower frequencies. If I go up, it's going to boost the lows, because we are multiplying the lows. If I go all the way down and play it again, notice that it's just less bassy. So we are attenuating the lows. This is what it means. Now then, we have the bass X. What the F is this? So this is the crossover. That's why you get an X. So it basically, when we go up, we just boost, and when we go down, we cut. But you need to decide where that cut is. And right here by default is on 440 hertz. So it means that when you boost, you're boosting 440 hertz and below. But if you go down, you're just cutting 440. So this means that you can select when or where you want to boost or you want to cut. If you go all the way up, you can do up to 1K, right? So you're going to be boosting 1K and below, which is a lot more, from the spectrum, or you can just cut a lot more. All right, so these are all the options that you get with the dark hall. Now we have the other one. So I'm going to move on to the next one, and it's going to be the coarse. Now notice that when I changed from dark hall, some of the options that we have in common are going to stay the same. For example, the decay is 10 seconds, but if I move on to the coarse, we get it, right? So we inherit the values. Right, so the coarse is a hall type of reverb, but it's a little bit different from the other one. Now, algorithmic reverbs have a strong relationship with the delays. So on this one, we are going to really hear this. Now, I'm going to go all the way to default values, and I'm going to go to the diffusion and the mod all the way down so we can, again, really get this. Now, wet is all the way up. So if I play it, notice how it sounds. It sounds like a delay, right? So this is how it sounds, because this is how it works. We are getting the reflections, so at some point we need to diffuse them to make it sound like a reverb. And this is the diffusion control. That's why when we go all the way down, we get a delay effect. So if we want to make it more dense, this is what diffusion means, make it controls the density. We just go up on the diffusion, and now we get the reverb effect, right? Now then mod is the same thing than before, is a coursing type of effect. Just gonna glue it, and on this one, notice it's completely different from the other one. Even though it's the same option, it sounds different, more coursed. So it's a little bit more aggressive. Now, then you have the decay, it works the same. The size, it works the same than the other style. And then you have the damping. Right here, again, it works the same. If I go damping all the way down, you're going to be chopping. If I go up, we chop the other side. So darker, brighter. Darker, brighter. Now I'm going to double click it. Now the low damp is kind of an addition to the damping control that you get right here. I'm going to keep playing it. If I go up, notice it sounds brighter. And if I go down, it's like kind of a, I would say boosting, but it sounds, you know, we get more lows. Right? And then you have the, you know, the distance. Now, remember that this works on reflection. So again, if I go all the way down on the diffusion, all the way down in the mod, and I play it, we hear that delay, you know, type of effect. Now, if I go to distance and go all the way down, the reflections are really close, right? Not separated. So we get a very close reflections. As I keep, if I go all the way up, now we get more separation. So now remember that when we are going to be taking these reflections and then diffuse them, and this will get and generate the reverb type of effect. So if they're, you know, the distance is more, it's just going to be more lush and, you know, big. Super close or distant. Right? And this is a very useful control if you want the reverb to be, you know, a little bit more in the back. So if I play it, notice that it sounds distant. And if I go all the way down, it sounds pretty close. So if you have a sound, you're going to be doing some dry and wet. If you want to make it sound more distant, go all the way up or just, you know, change this control. Alright, so double click on this, and I'm going to be going to the next one, and it's going to be the shimmer type of effect. Now, type of reverb. Now, if you don't know what the shimmer is, it's about pitch shifting. So it's going to detune, you know, some frequencies so you can get this shimmer type of effect. If there's no detuning, you get no shimmer. Now, all of the controls are pretty much the same. You still get your mod, you still get your diffusion, decay, size, and the damping. So the only controls that are changing is the pitch and the shimmer, and it's because, you know, this is how it works. Now, if I play something, is that we get those tones, those, you know, shimmer type of sounds, and it's because we need to control the pitch. So by what it's doing is detuning an octave up, so it's 12 semitones. But you can decide, well, you know, where you want to detune it. Maybe I'm going to be doing 7 semitones, and now it's not going to do, you know, a full octave. So this is going to sound a little bit different, right? Okay, so if I go down, it's going to be super close. And you can, you know, do something like this with the shimmer type of reverb. Get them really close, and you just get a little bit of separation. Like, you know, using a synthesizer with unison, something like that. You can still maybe go all the way down, 1 octave. Right, it's super cool. I'm gonna be going up because it's just a little bit more obvious. The shimmer effect, how much do you want? All the way down. You get nothing. If I go all the way up, it's pretty obvious. Now, still remember that the mod and the diffusion, you know, affects pretty much the whole thing. If I go down to the diffusion, we get those echoes. And notice that the diffusion is a little bit different than the other one. It sounds a little more distant. But again, going up on the diffusion and maybe on the mod, we get a smoother type of reverb. And all of this is, you know, completely up to you and your taste. Alright, so I'm going to double click so I can go back to default, and we're going to move on to the next one. Alright, so tights. Now, this one is really special. It's a little bit different from the other ones. It's going to modulate the output. Yes. So if you think about this, is a tremolo-ish type of effect. Most of the effects are, you know, pretty much the same. Decay, size, damping, delay. We just get the same right here. But on this section, it's going to change a little bit more, because remember, this is a tremolo-ish type of effect. We need to control how fast the tremolo is, how aggressive it's going to be, which waveform we're going to be using to modulate it, and the phase. All right, so I'm going to be playing it with default values. And I'm going to go up on the decay so we can really, you know, notice it. and more, maybe you're gonna go all the way up on to the wet. Notice it's like it's moving up and down. It's like, you know, moving. That's the tremolo-ish type of effect. Right. How fast do you want it to go? Well, that's gonna be the rate. If I go down, really cool sounds. Faster. And again, if you go slower, it's gonna be less noticeable, but still gonna be there. Going super fast. Right. Maybe I'm gonna go there. And now you can really hear the effect, right? So the tide, it's like the intensity of the effect, because maybe this is a little bit too much, so you can do less and just get a tiny little bit. If you go all the way up, it's going to be way aggressive. Right, I'm going to double click it, and now we need to discuss the options that we have right here at the top. Now the phase is going to offset the waveform phase. Now we are using something to be, you know, to modulate it. So the phase is going to, again, offset it. So by default, it's 90, and we can go all the way to 180. So now when you go up, since we are really separating them, it's gonna be a little bit wider. Right? Notice that the sound is super wide. If I double click, it's a little bit less wide. And if I go to other values, and maybe I'm gonna go really aggressive, so we can hear the difference. 90, super wide, less wide. And you can go all the way down, it's just no separation. So notice that now it's not super wide. Super wide, aligned, and not so wide, right? Okay, so then we have the wave. Now, of course, we are using something to modulate whatever it is that we are doing right here. So we need to decide which thing we want to use to modulate. By default, it's on 50%, which is going to be a sine wave. But if you go all the way down to 0, it's going to use, and I'm gonna separate it, it's going to use noise. So noise is an unpredictable sound source, so it's going to be a little bit, you know, random-ish. And as you keep going up, until we get to 50%, it's going to be a sine wave. If you keep going up and get close to 100%, now notice it's more aggressive. And it's because it's using a square. It's not so smooth anymore. So now all of these options, you know, is something that you just need to make a call, you know, decide what you want. But moving all of these controls and experimenting with this can get you to, you know, some really cool and creative places. So let's just double click. I'm gonna go back to default on pretty much everything. And we need to move on to the last one. And this one is super easy, is the prism. And almost all algorithmic reverbs, they have a non-linear type of reverb. So this is the one. So you have a long decay, super sustained, right? And I have a long decay, but still, since it's linear, a non-linear, it's going to take a long time to decay. This is how, you know, this type of reverb works. Now, still, you can change the size. You have a pre-delay. And again, you have the options for low mult and high mult. This is something we kind of already talked about on the other options. But on this one, again, it's just a control for bass and high frequencies. If I go down, this is less. If I go up, it's a little bit more. Now, the high mult is the same idea. Highly bright. If I go down, super dark. Now, the thing is that just like we had on the other style, which is the bass X and the mult X, we need to decide the crossover. So when we are working with the high mult, is going to be 800 hertz and up. That's why this one is so obvious. And with the low mult, we are working with 800 hertz and down and below, right? So I can, shift this to all the way up to 5K, but maybe I'm gonna be doing around 1K and something like that. And now it's gonna be a little bit more obvious. If I go down, it's gonna be darker because it's the high frequencies, above 1.4K. And it's gonna be massive. Maybe a little bit too much. So I'm gonna be double clicking and going back to default. Okay, so that's it. That's pretty much all the options that we get, all the things that we can do with this little device. And it's a, it's a really, really cool device. When you do combinations of parallel, you can decide a blend of, what you want to do with this. Or if you use serial, again, you can still use the blend. And it's a really creative type of device. Now, I could go to some vocals or guitars and drums and just, show you some examples, but this is a tutorial more than a review. You can, do it yourself at home. Now, hopefully, you now understand how this device works. And if you liked it and you now know how it works, like and subscribe, please. And if you have the money and you want to buy me a coffee, you can go to the links at the description. You have the links for PayPal, Patreon, and YouTube. Thanks. And you also have the QR at the screen. All right, so see you on the next one.